What's up, everyone? This is Mr. Richmond. You are watching video number 3 in our Life Science unit. We are continuing our discussion over classification. In the last video, we talked about the 6 kingdoms and each of those kingdoms' characteristics. And today we're going to move past the 6 kingdoms and we're going to talk about how classification doesn't stop with those large groups known as kingdoms. If we did stop with the kingdom groups, we would still have very large groups. Oh, some fine person going down the road, revving their engine. Anyway, the kingdoms would really be really large groups. For instance, let's talk about the animal group. You know, we have the animal kingdom, and it's great that we were able to pull that grouping from all living things. But it's still a big kingdom. I mean, think about animals. There's hundreds of thousands of different types of animals when you look at insects, when you look at all the mammals and the amphibians, the reptiles, and you got, all the vertebrates, the invertebrates, which, by the way, we will be looking at very soon. But the bottom line is there are lots of them. So what scientists said was, we really need to keep making additional groups, more groups and smaller groups, so that it's easier and easier to find what we're looking for. And that's exactly what they did. So we have these large kingdom groupings, and under those kingdom groupings we have some other groups with some crazy names, and that doesn't matter. But the bottom line is, as you move down through these other groupings, you're going to have less and less, you're going to have a fewer number of organisms in each of those groupings. So kingdom, really big group, and under each of the 6 kingdoms you're going to have phylums. You're going to have, under the phylums, you're going to have class groups. Under the class groups, order. Under those, family. Under those, genus. And then finally, the very smallest grouping, which actually is just one organism, and that's species. So by the time you get to species, you're just talking about one type of organism. So we go from lots to one. And so we got to think of it as maybe an upside down triangle, right? Or maybe a funnel. We start big and we work our way down. And it's really great when you're looking at studying living things. It really helps us to find what we're looking for and really understand the characteristics of organisms. So anyway, so those are the groupings. Genus is the second smallest group. Now let me give you an example of genus. Genus might be, say, all the small cats. All the small cats. That would include house cats, maybe a bobcat. There are some other smaller wild cats. I'm not talking about the Bengal tigers or lions or the big, large cats, but I'm talking about the small cats. So the genus might include all those small cats, and by the time you get to species, you would just pull one type of cat out, maybe a house cat. All right, which brings us to the next point, which is scientists knew it wasn't enough to just group organisms into groupings that made sense and made it easier to find. But they also said, we really need to come up with a naming system so that no matter where you are on planet Earth, no matter what language you speak, when you say this name, everyone's going to know what you're talking about. In order to do that, you've got to settle upon a common language. And it wasn't English, and it wasn't Spanish, German, French, none of that. It was actually Latin. And Latin is a language that's really not used that much anymore, other than maybe with doctors and in science. But they went with Latin. So some of these names are going to sound really crazy, but it's in Latin. And you don't speak Latin, so it's going to sound strange to you. But scientists have a naming system for each organism, and those names are known as an organism's scientific name, and it's in Latin. And every creature on planet Earth, every living thing has a scientific name. Let me give you an example. Let's go back to the house cat idea. So let's say we're looking at all the small cats, including the house cat, maybe a bobcat, the wild cats. And I could name a few, but I'm not going to take the time. But the small cats, wild and domestic, all right? So what we know is scientists have given those cats, those small cats, a name for their genus, and that name is Felis. So all the small cats of the world, at least in this particular genus, have a name, one part of their name, and that part is their genus, and for these cats it's called Felis. Now, in order to get to one particular species, we have also included another name. And it's real similar, really, to what we have. You know, there are many Richmonds. I'm one of them. You know, my wife's a Richmond, my children are Richmonds, my mom and dad are Richmonds. So if I just say Richmond, it's not enough. I mean, we've narrowed it down to a certain group of people. But what if I want to just know, or I just want to talk about one particular Richmond, in this case, Ken Richmond. All right? And that first name would be kind of like the species name. It gives you that specific information. Richmond kind of gives me a broad family name, which is the genus, and then the species would be like your first name. So genus would kind of be like your last name, and species would be kind of like your first name. And so genus would be all those cats, those small cats, and species would be one of those kinds of cats. So let's take a house cat, for instance. So along with all the other small cats, its genus name is Felis. But if you want to talk about its specific name, the name that lets us know which of those small cats we're talking about, you got to include the species name. And for a house cat, that is Domesticus. So when you put it together, Felis domesticus, you know, and all the other scientists throughout the world would know, that we're talking about a house cat, because they settled on that common language of Latin, and they know that when we use that term, that scientific name, when we put those two together, we're not just talking about just any old small cat. Felis domesticus is a house cat. Kitty. I've got one myself. Her name is Sassy, and she is sassy. So hopefully that makes sense. It's a little confusing, but if you'll just think of it in terms of last name and first name, I think that'll help you to understand it, right? Because really both names are important if someone wants to know who we're actually talking about, a particular person, right? And the last name's going to come first, and the first name's going to come last. So in this case, all the Richmonds, and then that would be Ken Richmond. Now that's not Latin, but that's okay. All right, my name's the same no matter what language we're speaking. But again, Felis, all the small cats. Felis domesticus, domesticus being the species name. Felis domesticus, house cat. And that helps us to narrow it down to one organism. And so scientific names are really important with science, in that it helps us to keep everything organized and properly identified, and we don't get one type of cat mixed up with another type of cat. You know, another small cat, a bobcat, might be Felis bobcatus. That's not it. I don't know what it is, but it would be different. It would be Felis because it's a small cat, but then it would have a different species name. So I can't memorize all these things because I don't speak Latin. So anyway, hopefully that helps. So again, the classification groupings do not stop with kingdoms. We have other groups that continue to work its way through the classification process. We use those groupings to help us narrow down more and more until we get to one organism. And with each of those groupings, we have fewer and fewer organisms until we get to species, just one. The scientific name is made up of the genus and the species names of the organisms. That is in Latin. And I gave you the example of Felis domesticus. Felis being the genus, domesticus being the species, Felis domesticus, the house cat, scientific name. So hopefully that helps a little bit. We'll continue talking about this in class. I'm praying that helped. Out of all the information I present on classification, this is probably the toughest to get. So if you're getting this, You're doing good. And if you're not getting it, don't worry about it. We'll keep working on it in class. All right? All right. Thanks so much for watching. Hope that helped. See ya.